Join me today as we talk a little bit about the cost of material on streaming and whether or not it's really working for anybody. This is the Geek Cabal channel. My name's Bobbie. And like I said, this is going to be about the costs of some of the things on streaming. Now, by that, I primarily mean the costs that the services are paying to create the shows on there. Um, this has been prompted because, we have the never-ending saga of Star Wars: The Acolyte, where we keep finding out that no, it in fact cost even more than we thought last week, and I think now we're up to $230 million. That's what we think it cost, and so it turns out that Andor also cost quite a bit of money. Actually, cost more than Rogue One cost. Now, part of the difference is Andor actually looks like Star Wars, feels like Star Wars, so maybe it's worth it. Um, but what I'm going to ask is perhaps the current profit model of both of movies, TV shows, Hollywood products, is the current profit model just broken? You know, that's what I want to kind of focus on here, because in yesteryear you'd release a movie in theaters, and there its success was determined by, did it recoup its budget? And there's a rough formula you can follow for that, which used to be a movie had to make twice its budget at the box office, because whenever a movie first releases, the theater keeps a very small percentage of the ticket sales. The bulk of it goes to the distribution company. So, like for the six George Lucas Star Wars movies, that would have been Fox, because they were the ones distributing the movie, and then Fox would have its own internal uh, contract with Lucasfilm and all that on the back end. So now, as the movie is in a theater longer, however, the theater gets a greater and greater percentage of the box office, which is why theaters love movies that just go forever, like Titanic. Titanic didn't make all of its money up front. Titanic made like $600 million domestically, if I remember correctly, but it didn't make it up front. It made it by making like $30 million, like 20 weeks in a row. It just kept making money, and so that was a boon to theaters, because at a certain point they're keeping almost all the box office, and it just kept on rolling. Uh, like this year, Twisters, sorry, would be a good example. That was still in theaters just a couple weeks ago. It was still making money, and the one of the last movies I went to go see, like a month after Twisters came out, Twisters was still selling out at that theater. So, they loved it, I'm sure. And that's domestic. Usually foreign theaters take a different chunk. I've been told it's roughly 50-50 usually. Now, lately, people have been also, I say lately, like last 10, 15 years, people have also been noticing that the promotional budget for these movies is insane. And for some movies, it's as high as the movie. It's the high as, it's, I'll learn to talk here in a minute. It's as high as the budget for the movie itself. And so that means that you've got to make that much more at the box office. And so the problem becomes, afterwards, then movies used to be able to rely on VHS sales, and then DVD and Blu-ray, and as we've moved through the years here, which enabled them to keep making these big budget juggernauts, because as long as they broke even at the box office, then they'd make a bunch of money on the back end. They'd have that. They'd have toy deals, eventually like TV rights. After they'd go to like the HBO first, then like the TV, and there's a big tail for all the money. Even movies that you probably think never made their money back almost no movie actually loses money. Like, a movie has to be pretty spectacularly bad to actually lose money or be just insanely over budget. Like one example was the movie Pearl Harbor. It notoriously had a huge budget and didn't do great at the box office, but from everything I understand, it did actually make its money back eventually. The Rocky Horror Picture Show. Now, the Rocky Horror Picture Show took years and years to do it because it was initially was a bomb, but these second run theaters just kept running it every weekend, and eventually it surpassed, and now it's well into profit because it's still running. And that's a movie from the 70s. So, uh, yeah, so you have this profit model, but now you have massively declined home video sales because now it goes to streaming. And here we get into this weird territory of, okay, so like it was such a thing that Netflix would pay and then they would have it on streaming. But now all these studios are like, hey, let's cut Netflix out of the equation. Let's just have our own streaming service, which is a foolhardy idea. And so that's what they've all done. So now whenever the Star Wars movies come to streaming, they go to Disney Plus. So no one's paying for them. No company is paying for the rights. They just go to Disney Plus, which Disney also owns. So they're having to make it up in subscriptions. And then it's really hard to tell, like, you know, how much subscription money do we attribute to this thing's back end? Because they're subscribing to Disney Plus. They're not subscribing to The Rise of Skywalker or Rogue One or Force Awakens or Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. They could just as easily be subscribing for Return of the Jedi and, God forbid, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Although I think the Indiana Jones movies got taken off there for some reason recently. I'm sure they'll be back because Disney does own them. But you have these things happen, and it's like, okay, so how does that figure into anything? And because of this, now does that mean the tail is shorter, or does that mean the tail is longer? Because if Disney Plus runs for the next 10 years somehow, then in all that time, does Rogue One keep racking up money on the back end? Does Andor keep racking up money? And that's why I'm trying to get at, because of streaming, does the way they looked at profit and loss actually still make sense? Because if you spend, $230 million on the Acolyte, now it doesn't magically make that back in this first week. Well, from each episode, it's 8 episodes, so it's like 2 months. Like, how do you measure that? I mean, the view total, but like, how do you quantify that with your subscribers? Do you look at it as, did they subscribe and this is the only thing they watch, so all their subscription dollars in theory go to this? Is it split across everything on the platform, in which case everything's only making a few pennies probably? I mean, I just don't know. There has to be some metric, and we have no idea what it is. And could it be such a thing that over the course of 10 years, the Acolyte eventually makes that money back? Like with the toy deals, like the toy deal with Hasbro, do they just have an open-ended Star Wars deal? Or do they have to deal with like each property as it comes out? In which case, when the figures for the Acolyte don't sell, does it still get money attributed to it? And we have all those unanswered questions. And I got the feeling that the studios have similar questions and don't know how to quantify them, or they wouldn't have engaged in this foolishness. And what do I mean by that? Well, by all these companies having these streaming services, people have to pick and choose, okay? Because otherwise you're right back to cable, and cable will give you more choices. Plus, you have a couple that are just free, like Tubi and God, I can't think of the other one. But there's a couple of them that are just free. Now, yeah, everything on it's probably from like the 90s. That doesn't make it less entertaining. It doesn't pass the time any less. I mean, there are people that just like tune into Law and Order for hours on end. They've probably seen all the episodes. They don't care. There's something compelling about it. They just keep watching it. And so with streaming, since all these choices exist, some of them have all kinds of things, all kinds of older shows on there. And from that, we know for a fact that people are beginning to gravitate towards like Friends and Seinfeld. Like these are the things that are being the most watched things across streaming. Because number one, there's just a metric shit ton of episodes. But number two, they're still entertaining. Like there's a continuity. You can just turn it on, just go. And, I shouldn't have said there's a continuity because I'm about to say there's no continuity. I mean, there's a continuity in theme and structure. So, like with Seinfeld, you could set that thing to random, as long as you don't watch the final episode before the others, because you won't get the references then. But you could just set it to random and just watch episodes willy nilly all over the place because there's virtually no continuity in that show. There's only a handful of events that happen that are, later referenced and won't make sense if you see them out of order. And so it doesn't matter. You just put it on the background and then whatever you're doing, you do. Same thing like what people do with Law and Order, I assume. You can't really do that with Andor or The Acolyte or any Star Wars show because there's a linear story and each episode is part of that story. See, like you could do that with Star Trek The Next Generation. You could just watch random episodes. Only a handful of them have continuity between them. You could do that for the first couple seasons of Deep Space Nine, but eventually you have to start paying attention because eventually an actual storyline that's cohesive and moves forward per episode emerges. And that's been the trade off. We get better shows that have longer narrative arcs, but you have to pay more attention to them. It's harder to just put them on in the background as background noise and get the general gist of what's going on. You need to actually pay attention. And so that can work if you have a good show. And that's why Andor worked. It's just not enough people watched it. Because originally it's going to be 5 seasons, and I think they've scaled it back. It's just going to be the second season, which sucks because it was a good show. I don't know if they could really stretch it out for 5 seasons, but I think whoever wrote that could probably give it a really good go. So I expect great things from season 2. You could do that with The Walking Dead because The Walking Dead, while it's important you pay attention, like the season has an arc. So you can miss bits and pieces. Now you might miss important people dying because The Walking Dead kills off main characters in random episodes. It's not just like, oh, I need to pay attention for the season finale. Like, no, like you'll get people dying like episode 3. Just happens. And so that's a problem, because people have a short attention span because they've got screens in their face all day. And so this long form storytelling works for some people. I like it. I like cohesion. I like a good narrative, but I also watch Law and Order. Like I also just want something on in the background sometimes. That's why half the time I've got the news in the background. It's not because I'm paying any damn attention to it. It's just because there's nothing else on. And there, at least maybe something new is going to happen and I'll know about it. But honestly, it's just for noise. It's whenever I forget that I have the streaming services and I can just put on something else. So yeah, so I don't really know who's winning and losing here. I know Netflix is winning because they're posting profits. And Netflix understands these things. Like Netflix is not spending this kind of money on their shows. They're just not, and even with, maybe Stranger Things season 5 probably has a considerable budget. That's also going to be like the most wildly popular thing on the streaming service. It will cause people to go back and rewatch the seasons. I've already rewatched everything for Stranger Things. I've watched all the way through it like 3 times now because I myself rewatched it gearing up for season 4. And then I convinced my niece Jasmine to watch it whenever season 4 was complete because 4, it got to a certain point in the season and it's like, oh, tune in 3 weeks for the other episodes. And I was like, oh, damn it, Netflix, why'd you screw me like this? So I had time in there for she and I to watch the whole thing over again and then smoothly watch the rest of that season. And I don't know if I'll do that again before season 5, but it's a possibility. You know, I did not do that for Loki, and I liked Loki season 1, you know, but I felt I knew everything for season 2 because there weren't that many episodes. You know, it wasn't a whole lot to keep track of. If somehow there's a season 3, I'll rewatch it, but I need to rewatch season 2. I need to get Jim to watch season 2 so we can talk about it. Because it was good. And that was another thing. Loki cost some astronomical amount of money too. And so, you know, it's again like Netflix isn't spending this much on shows. They're just not. And I don't know where the money from Disney is going. Because it's not like the shows like, it's not like they're like, oh, this costs 4 times as much. I can really see it here on the screen. You're not getting that. It's not like, oh, the acting power in here. It's like, no, you're not getting that either. The writing. Don't make me laugh. That's, it's definitely not in the writing department. Uh, or if it is, it's a colossal waste of money. Like monkeys with typewriters could probably bang out better things than half of what Disney's making. And so I don't know where all the money's going for Disney and some of the others too. You know, there's just the Disney's the really, really visible one. So I honestly don't know. You know, I really think that Hollywood is going to have to recalibrate its metrics. And, you know, like Disney, they have this huge back catalog. Eventually, these Star Wars shows will just be considered part of the back catalog. How will they calculate if that they're still maintaining revenue because people will still be watching some of them, presumably. And so I don't know how they calculate that. Will these all eventually cross some finish line and actually have their budgets back? Will that matter, you know, for Disney shareholders? Um, you know, so these are questions that need to be answered sooner rather than later. And maybe a different metric needs to be established. Um, I mean, Netflix is sitting over here like, hey, we're going to show all of our data. We're going to do it twice a year, and you're going to see who's watching what. And they're doing that because they know that if the other streaming services reveal the same data, that they're going to win by a mile because they are the juggernaut here. And they have figured out how to make money off of this because they're posting profits. And from what I was watching earlier, there's a slim chance that I think it's this quarter they're going to post profits greater than Disney, like Netflix. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's actually working for anybody because I don't know what metric we have to judge by. You know, like we know numbers of subscribers, but if you're paying more or less per subscription, that's more or less money. And so there's just not a consistent metric yet that's been established. We're going to need new metrics for movies because of the declining sales of declining home video sales and the rush to streaming and the rush to streaming on your own platform so you're not getting paid for it, you know? So yeah, like we need a recalibration. I don't know what to propose, unfortunately, because I hate people that come up with problems that don't have solutions, but I don't know. It's going to take a more creative accountant than me, and Hollywood's got very creative accountants. So I don't know. You know, here we are, lost in space. So yeah, if you've got any ideas, let me know down in the comments. Let me know your thoughts on all this. Uh, I, One other quick thing, and I kind of alluded to this, but the other thing they have to take into account is because of all these streaming services, people have too many choices. Okay. Now, from a consumer standpoint, we're in like almost a golden age of choice, but we have too many. This is like going in the cereal aisle. If you like several different kinds of cereal, it's an entire aisle of cereal. Which one are you going to pick? You know, I have legitimately stood there for the better part of 10 minutes trying to decide before. One, because I don't eat cereal all that often. So if any box I buy is going to be there for a month or two. And so, yeah, because I sit there like, well, I like this one, but I also like this one. I also like this one. It's not like hot dogs. I like one kind of hot dog. Um, it's not like milk. I've got what I suppose 5 choices, 6 maybe. I've got 2% whole milk, skim milk, 1%, um, and then a couple like fake milk choices, and that's it. It's a simple choice. Juice. Which brand of orange juice do I want? Okay, that's the choice. Not the same with cereal. Not the same with streaming. Streaming, we have almost every bit of content that's been made in the last 50 years at our fingertips. That's why I think Netflix was the one that installed this. They wisely have like a button that'll just randomly pick things for you because decision paralysis is real with these streaming services. That's also why some of them have gone to like TV, like where they run episodes and you just jump in wherever it is in the stream. That's smart. That will work, in my opinion. Uh, Everyone else needs to copy, and then of course there's the X factor of Amazon, where they don't even have to make money on the streaming service because they're making all their money elsewhere. This is just like a side project for them, but it's enough to just wreck everything. Same thing with Apple, and yeah. So I don't know. It's all in a weird place. We'll eventually come to some kind of consensus on metrics for what actually works and what doesn't. But until then, we're all just kind of floating around with no data. So anyway, I'm actually going to end it this time. So let me know down in the comments what you guys think. Like, share, subscribe. Sharing and commenting are the big ways to help us with the channel. We always appreciate it. But otherwise, see you out there in those digital airwaves.